Spectral Medical. Let's bring on Chris Seto, the CEO. There he is. Chris, how are we doing today?
Good, thanks.
All right, I see your slides up. Let's get them up on the screen, guys. And Chris, take us home. Actually, can we go into presentation mode before I hop out
Is
here?
it not in presentation mode? Hold on for a second.
Yeah.
Let me just make sure that, hold on.
And you can take us home, sir. Take us into the close. We are 45 minutes away from the close here on this Wednesday. Oh, I'm sorry, Venus. I missed your question. I apologize.
Sorry. Did that show up, Spencer?
No. You're sharing the. Yeah, there you go. You got to switch over your screens. You're sharing the wrong screen here.
Is that it?
Yes, that's it. Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Am I good to go?
You're good to go.
Great. Thanks very much. Very happy to be here. So let me just get into the presentation. Spectral Medical. Spectral Medical is a clinical stage medical device company developing products for the treatment of significant critical care needs. And this is specifically in the areas of septic shock and renal disease. On the sepsis side, Spectral is committed to addressing what we'd say are unmet needs in the treatment of endotoxemic septic shock. And we have two products, the sepsis diagnostic EAA and its companion septic shock therapeutic PMX cartridge. It really is precision treatment utilizing the EAA diagnostic and PMX therapeutic device to target appropriate septic shock patients. We believe the addressable U.S. market is about $1.5 billion per annum for our product. There is no FDA-approved solution in the market, and Spectral has no competitor. We're running what we believe is a de-risked phase 3 FDA confirmatory trial. And at the same time, we've de-risked the commercialization side. We entered into an exclusive distribution agreement with Baxter in February 2020 for the PMX and EAA diagnostic for the US and Canadian markets. We also have a wholly owned subsidiary called Dialco Medical, and which is in the dialysis console market. Our end markets address patient needs across the dialysis spectrum for both acute and chronic dialysis. Certainly, it removes operational complexity from dialysis treatments for both patients and providers. The addressable U.S. market for Dialco is anticipated to grow to somewhere around $5.5 billion, $6 billion by 2025. We have a recurring revenue model, so an installed device and consumables. Our two products are SAMI and DIMI. SAMI is a device targeting the acute market, so that's dialysis in the ICU. It's FDA cleared and Health Canada approved since 2018. Our DIMI device is targeting the chronic market, so that's dialysis in clinics, skilled nursing facilities, and ultimately at home. We do have Health Canada approval for use in all settings. It's FDA cleared for use in hospital and clinical settings, and we are progressing on our FDA regulatory path for in-home use. In terms of the sepsis side of things, the addressable market. So, septic shock is a big issue globally. Specifically in the US, it's a leading cause of death in the ICUs and a leading contributor to healthcare costs. Each year in the US, there's about 330,000 patients who develop septic shock, and it's a nasty disease. It has a mortality rate of, call it 40 to 50%. Spectral's addressable market is a subset of these 330,000 patients, with approximately 120,000 or so patients suffering from what's called endotoxemic septic shock each year. And this represents a US addressable market of about $1.5 billion per annum. Just measuring and treating endotoxemic septic shock. So we have taken a unique approach in the world of sepsis in that our treatment is very targeted and very specific at the end of the day. On the left-hand side, we have our EAA diagnostic. It's the only FDA-approved diagnostic that measures endotoxin activity levels. And on the right, we have our PMX cartridge, which is really a blood purification device that filters out endotoxins. The diagnostic is a rapid whole blood test with results in approximately 30 minutes. The PMX cartridge runs on a dialysis pump, and the therapy is 2 cartridges over a 24-hour period. And based on that diagnostic, we know which cohort of septic patients will benefit from our PMX therapy. In terms of the competitive landscape, and I use the word competitive quite loosely because there really is no competing device at the end of the day. But this slide just points out a few key differentiating attributes between our therapeutic device and competing therapies, if you will. First is these competing devices are not targeted therapies. They're very non-specific as there's no diagnostic to guide their utilization. It makes it difficult for them to know who to treat and ultimately to show any kind of efficacy at the end of the day over standard of care. And second, these other blood purification devices are not making a sepsis claim. Their endpoints are drastically different. Ours is a 28-day mortality, whereas theirs are a reduction in some form of molecule or organism. For a sepsis claim with the FDA, there is no other endpoint other than a hard 28-day mortality. This slide just represents that our device has actually been used for 20 plus years. It's been treated on 300,000 patients worldwide. It has 300 peer-published papers. There's been approximately 10,000 plus patients that have entered into trials outside of the US, and it has an excellent safety profile at the end of the day. Lessons learned from our EUPHRATES trial. So this is just a brief history on our regulatory path for PMX. We ran a trial called EUPHRATES, which is a 450 patient blinded trial. Unfortunately, the results fell short for an FDA approval as the mortality benefit only showed an approximately 4% mortality benefit relative to standard of care. However, the FDA said, don't go away. They said, you've run the best sepsis trial and your database is robust. So go away, mine your database and see if there's a solution, given that there is no other therapy for sepsis at the end of the day. So we mined our database, and what we learned was certainly there were some patients or a significant number of patients who were just too sick to treat. And this would be akin to having, stage 4 cancer. Ultimately and sadly, the patient was going to die regardless of the therapy. When we removed this cohort from our results, we found that under the criteria of EA between 0.6 to 0.9 with a mod score greater than 9, there was a 10% absolute benefit and 29% relative mortality benefit at day 28 relative to standard of care. And this really formed the basis for what we are saying is our TIGRIS trial, which we're running today. So here's our TIGRIS trial design and why we believe that the trial is de-risked. The FDA indicated that our subset of EUPHRATES data was powerful and that we just needed more data that is in line with the subset for FDA approval. So TIGRIS is set up as a 150 patient confirmatory trial. It's open label, it's 2-to-1 randomization treated to standard of care, and we should have approval if we show similar results as the prior. On top of that, we're allowed to take the prior subset of 179 patients and add the results of the 150 patient TIGRIS trial. So really, we believe that this really stacks the deck in our favor for ultimate approval. The PMX regulatory pathway to approval. So our timeline to approval was certainly impacted by the COVID pandemic. We do run our trial in ICUs, and the ICU environments, while they are returning to normal, they are still not quite normal yet. Today, we actually stand at 25 patients enrolled out of the 150 patients that we do need to ultimately enroll. Results-wise, now we haven't disclosed the results, but we're exactly where we need to be from a mortality endpoint perspective. So we're quite encouraged, regardless of the sample size at this point in time. Now, we do see last patient enrollment around the middle of 2022, with FDA approval around the end of year of 2022. This is the PMX opportunity and the illustrative financial benefits to Spectral. And so it really centers around the commercialization agreement with Baxter. From a PMX commercialization perspective, we have de-risked commercialization through this exclusive distribution agreement with Baxter, which, as discussed, we entered into in early February 2020. The full commercial burden is solely Baxter's responsibility. We've contracted strong commercial terms with an initial milestone payment and 2 further milestone payments to be made by Baxter to maintain exclusive distribution rights. We have robust minimum quantities and minimum pricing for PMX, as well as robust distribution economics, which would result in approximately 60 to 70% net EBITDA margins to Spectral. Additionally, Baxter is the best commercialization partner with approximately 40% market share with their ICU presence and installed critical care devices throughout the US ICUs. And this should expedite market penetration of PMX well beyond what Spectral could do on a go-it-alone basis. If we do hit our market penetration target of, call it around 40%, this would result in net EBITDA contributions of about $200 million US to Spectral on an annual basis. So just to move on to our Dialco business and really the Dialco strategic priorities over the next, call it 24 months. We're focused on several key priorities. On the DIMI side, we're finalizing all FDA regulatory approvals for the DIMI device over the next, call it 12 to 16 months. This includes expanded FDA clearance for PD modality and to execute on our usability trial for in-home use. We view these approvals as when events and not if events. We're also working on completing our product portfolio offering, with the last key item being the development of our own bagged dialysate. And this will allow us to maximize total system sales margins, as well as provide us with pricing flexibility as we commercialize the DIMI device. On the SAMI side, our focus is on increasing commercialization of the SAMI device. This includes strengthening the pipeline of tender and RFP activities and increasing clinical evaluations. And finally, a potential strategic partnership, which is more focused on the distribution side to accelerate market exposure and penetration. In terms of all of this, the overall rollout, we see, call it a 24 to 36 month path to 1,000 installed devices into the field. And we believe this represents about 25 million in EBITDA. And that would be at what I would say is a very early stage of growth of Dialco at the end of the day. I'll just talk about the acute dialysis market. And this is where, once again, our SAMI device plays and where we're going to position it. So for SAMI, we're targeting the ICU and ICU step-down segments. We see limited players in these segments, with incumbents being Baxter and Fresenius, and to a lesser extent, Outset Medical. These targeted segments represent approximately 35 machines in service today and is growing around 12% per annum, in addition to the replacement of out-of-date machines. And this represents about 7,500 to 8,000 new devices entering the market in the US every year. And we believe SAMI is well positioned to capture about 20% of this market on a steady state basis. The SAMI user experience. So why would ICUs adopt SAMI? Well, it's simple. It's usability and it's time. The interface makes this device easy to use for clinicians. From a time perspective, it's reduced time to train, reduced maintenance, reduced setup, and it's versatile. For example, from a training perspective, SAMI takes 4 hours, while traditional devices take anywhere from 18 to 24 hours over a 2 to 3 day period. And really, this slide shows the SAMI user experience and ratings by 10 nurses at the University of Michigan. And I'll just read some of these comments here. Just on the right, the disposable cassette is very easy to assemble. You just plug and play. Another, nurses were successfully trained through only one-time virtual training provided to Dialco, and I don't think any other machine can achieve the same outcome. Another goes on to state, it's easy to use, safe and effective. We have great results with SAMI in the use of CRT and PERT. And then finally, we have no safety concerns whatsoever recorded. This is just a snapshot of the virtual training that we did deploying the SAMI device at the University of Michigan at the peak of the pandemic. So we were not allowed to visit the ICU at the University of Michigan to actually install and deploy this device. It was done completely remotely over a 4-hour period, solely on smartphones and iPads. The chronic dialysis market and DIMI positioning. So today, this spectrum between in-center, home, and SNFs represents about 550,000 patients. Now, the predominant center of treatment is in-center, with about 88% of those patients being treated in-center, with only 12% at home. And out of that 12%, 10% of the 12 is through PD modality, while a small sliver is through HD modality at home. There really is a lot of tailwinds, though, for treatment at home. Some of those factors being reimbursement rates for in-home presidential executive order to push 80% of treatment to in-home by 2025. Certainly the COVID-19 pandemic has acted as a tailwind to get people out of in-center and into their own homes from a safety profile perspective. And then ultimately, it's the patient's desire for a less intrusive treatment program. And so to be able to do this at home versus traveling to in-clinic, 3 times a week for 4-hour treatments at a time really is a huge push. For DIMI, we're targeting the at-home and skilled nursing facilities market as well as the PD market. With respect to the PD market, is the more established home dialysis market, as mentioned, with approximately 50,000 patients today. Patients typically start on PD modality, and then they last for about 5 years before having to transition to HD. DIMI is the only device with dual HD and PD modalities. So the attractive feature around this is that it allows clinics and patients to get established on one device and then ultimately to stay on that device versus having to train on 2 separate devices, which can act as certainly a barrier to adoption for HD at home. For the at-home and SNF markets, we're targeting geographies with low water quality as DIMI utilizes prepackaged dialysate. In terms of barriers to home adoption, there are a number of barriers that have impeded home HD adoption in the past. DIMI mitigates a number of these barriers. Certainly some of the barriers are complexity of current technology and the required skill set to actually utilize the device. A lack of confidence. This is a huge barrier with training for both the patient and the doctor. Certainly water is an issue. Many places it's too hard or low quality for many areas throughout the US. Reverse osmosis systems can be quite intrusive from a home and renovation perspective, maintenance, and also added extra utility costs. And then ultimately this whole disconnection between the patient and the doctor. So DIMI, it's easy to use. It's got a user interface that is very intuitive. It has Wi-Fi connectivity that allows for connection between patient and doctor. And ultimately, it is less intrusive on the patient. This is just the DIMI patient experience survey. We ran an in vitro test on DIMI with 10 patients, and ultimately, here's what users had to say. DIMI is extremely instinctive and playful. The pictogram clearly helps to understand and use. The information, alarm signals, and messages do not generate stress, and that's a huge issue. Solo treatment is totally possible with DIMI. And finally, DIMI is so small and silent for the home. One of the differentiating factors as well is between DIMI and some of the newer HD devices is the generation of dialysate. DIMI uses pre-mixed dialysate bags, while others generate dialysate on site through a reverse osmosis system. And we believe there's a number of benefits to pre-mixed dialysate that ultimately are less intrusive on the patient's lifestyle and confidence levels. And some of these being, without reverse osmosis, there's a smaller footprint, it's more portable. There's no risks or challenges associated with water quality. There's no extra water preparation time. The inherited PD habits using pre-filled dialysate bags. There's no extra financial burden for utilities or home renovation. And finally, no need to run disinfection. This is just a water map of the US. It may sound trivial, but water quality is an issue across the US, with approximately 85% of the US water supply considered hard water. And finally, consumable storage. So one of the initial knocks against pre-mixed is the logistics and storage issues. The rebuttal, one, pre-mixed is following the PD model, which requires similar amounts of storage for consumables. And as a reminder, PD is the current home dialysis model in use. And two, reverse osmosis still requires a significant amount of storage for concentrate, disinfectant, and other consumables. And really, this is just a pictogram contrasting the two. On the top would be DIMI, to the very right, the number of boxes for storage requirement. And then on the bottom, you see reverse osmosis. And really, the contrast between the two is really not that different at the end of the day from a storage and logistics perspective. And then just to finalize the presentation, we have some key, the usability trial. Just a quick glance at the DIMI usability trial. This is the final step for FDA and home clearance. It's a 35-patient trial, which will take about 12 months in total. It's a comparison of in-center therapy versus in-home therapy, and really focusing on safety and usability. Ultimately, we see this as when and not if from an FDA approval perspective, and we expect to receive that approval somewhere in Q4 of 2022. In terms of some of the upcoming catalysts, TIGRIS interim patient enrollment, and where Baxter would make another milestone payment. We see this somewhere in late Q1 of 2022. Last patient of TIGRIS enrollment somewhere around the middle of 2022, with FDA approval at the end of 2022. FDA clearance for DIMI and home use sometime Q4 of 2022. And then finally, exploring, more than exploring, but a dual listing of Spectral shares on a senior US exchange. We continue to prepare, and really we are working on our 20F filing at this point in time. This is just a cap table of Spectral. Today, there's about 274 million fully diluted shares outstanding. At the time of our last report, there was about 14.3 million in cash on hand. That concludes our presentation. Once again, it's Spectral Medical, and our ticker symbol is EDT on the TSX.
Thanks a lot, Chris. A couple of questions before we wrap it up here from the chat. I'm not going to bother to try to pronounce your name, but he's asking about the timeline for the uplist. I guess it's been in the works for a while. So can you just provide some clarity about that?
Yeah, so what I would say is, we don't have necessarily a definitive time. I mean, what I would say is, from a board perspective, ideology-wise, the entire board is acknowledges that we have to be on the NASDAQ, given that, that's where, capital appreciates stories like ours at the end of the day, and where investors will appreciate stories like ours at the end of the day. What I would say is, it really is visibility on the catalysts and timing of that. So the one thing I don't want to do is just go immediately and uplist on the NASDAQ and have no story to tell shortly thereafter. So we do believe, now what I do believe is, based on, so the second last slide that I did show is that 2022 is going to have a significant number of catalysts. And the belief is that we list in advance of those catalysts actually being achieved. So I can't give the specific date, but what I would say is, my gut instinct would be that this is an early 2022 type of event.
And then Ned is asking when we can start to see a material quantity of SAMI devices sold. Yeah, I don't. We're not giving sort of visibility on that. There's a few things that are in the works. We've had a number of clinical evaluations. The sales cycle is a little bit slow. It frankly takes about 18 months between introduction, clinical evaluation, to leading to a commercial sale. What I can say is, we have hired a number of individuals throughout the US that are supporting that. We are in discussions on a potential partnership with a strategic, and that can accelerate things quite significantly. So what I would say is, stay tuned on that front. This is something that I'd want to consummate sooner rather than later. All right, Chris Seto is the CEO. You can see him on the screen there, the URL, the ticker, Spectral Medical. Chris, thanks for taking us home today. Thanks for speaking at the Benzinga Small Cap Conference.
Great. Thanks very much, and I appreciate your time.